And we are live. Josh, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah. I feel like we're matching today with our tank tops. It's
Yes.
it's almost as if we planned this earlier.
Yeah, well, like looking
Just
down
like
at your feet and you go, "Oh my God, they match."
Oh my God, that's a story for another day.
Hmm.
So I'd like to welcome everyone back to Pride in the Living Room, Jewmos edition. So a quick reminder, this project was originally founded by the Israeli LGBT task force Agudah in memory of the 2009 Tel Aviv Gay Center shooting and the Jerusalem Pride Parade stabbing in 2015. And Ha'agudah created Pride in the Living Room to offer a stage and a voice to LGBT Jews from around the world to share their stories, encouraging empathy and community. So, all of that said, it is my pleasure to welcome Josh to the stage. Josh, over to you.
Hi. So, my name is Josh. I am currently a 31-year-old gay male living in Orlando, Florida. Um, so, you want to talk about connections between the two? Tel Aviv encountered their own massacre. Orlando's very familiar with that as well. Um, Getting onto that later. So like I said, I'm 31. I was born in 1989 to a Jewish mother and a converted father who I believe used to be Lutheran. So, um, well, technically, I guess bloodline, you could say I'm half Jewish. By conversion rules, I'm full Jewish. Um, I remember growing up, we were probably the equivalent of the Easter Christmas Christians. We were in synagogue on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and that is mostly what we did. With the exception being, I was at Sunday school every week, probably starting from when I was 5 or 6, I think. Um, so I remember being very immersed in my synagogue at least once a week. Made lots of friends. Did a Purim parade here and there. I'm pretty sure I dressed up with a girl I thought I had a crush on at the time. We matched. Um, and I seem to remember that being fun. But as far as like immersing religion in the household, it wasn't necessarily something that we were practicing every day. I mean, you could walk through our house and you could see um, the candelabra here or a picture. We had a needlepoint rabbi picture in our dining room that I'd always look at. So religion was there, but it was never always front of mind. And I think I've kind of carried that with me through my life. And I think that'll probably apply the more I tell my story. But um, I think like most um, boys and girls, I did not get fully immersed in my religion until bar mitzvah time. I would imagine that's pretty common. So I was bar mitzvahed at 13, like every other good old Jewish boy. And um, I remember that it was a fun time for me, but I didn't necessarily feel 100% invested because I think by the time I hit 13, I was also starting to get into theater as a kid. Um, and there were just other distractions happening in my life. By the time I hit 13, we were doing family gatherings less. My grandma was ill, and so we used to do Passover when I was a kid, and we would have all the family come in Passover. But as grandma was getting ill, family gatherings started becoming less, and so that was my tie to the religion was really my family. So you have this interesting event happening where it is your bar mitzvah and the time when you're supposed to be really, really immersed in this religion. And I'm also pulling away from it at the same time due to distractions and other events in my family life. But I did it. I learned my Torah portion. And I was bar mitzvahed at 13. And then at 14, my grandma passed. And I think I learned a lot about my family's relationship with religion when my grandma passed, And I think that's probably pretty typical when grandmas and grandpas pass in the Jewish faith, because, you know, there's the going through of the house and the digging up and finding things. And that's when I learned that while we grew up in and I'm not sure what it's like internationally, but at least in the US, we have our 4 levels of Judaism. It's Reform, Conservative, Traditional, Orthodox. And I went to a conservative synagogue, but my parents, well, my mom rather, grew up in a traditional synagogue. So it's kind of just going down a level each time. I feel like it's probably where it was going. But I learned a lot about my family history when my grandma passed, and I learned a lot about Jewish customs, especially because, you know, at 14, there I am also immersed in Shiva and what that means. So there's all of this immersion happening in probably like a 2-year time period, while I'm also pulling away and going through puberty and discovering other aspects about my life. And I remember probably it was 15, 16, then I started coming out to some of my friends. And there was one of my friends, Jake, who grew up Mormon, but I don't think claims to be anymore, or maybe he does. I don't know. I've known a lot of Mormons that go back and forth. But Jake said to me when I came out to him, I said, you know, I think I'm gay. And he said, oh, well, then how are you going to be Jewish? And I didn't understand what that meant. And he was like, well, yeah, I don't think you could be both. And in my head, I was always like, no, that's Christian. That's Christianity. That, you know, they throw the Bibles at their kids and kick them out. But not Judaism. And it wasn't until later I learned that there are aspects of Judaism that are a little anti-LGBT, especially as you go more towards the traditional Orthodox side of things. And I learned that through some family friends, where out of 5 siblings, 2 of those siblings happened to be gay, and the older sister was Orthodox and stopped talking to the gay ones. So I had a lot going on in my brain when I started discovering that I was gay, because I'm guarded, not only because my father served in the Navy for 21 years, but because my mother is Jewish, and now I don't know if Judaism is going to accept me. Also, I think, as is tradition, my mother's dramatic, as we're all used to as Jewish gay men. And so I just didn't know how this was going to go. So I think, as is typical for a lot of gay men, I kind of hid that inside and just kind of let my interest in the religion kind of stick around over here, maybe. Not really paying attention, but knowing that it's there. So I didn't really go to synagogue much after my bar mitzvah, which, as I've talking to other friends, is not really uncommon either. And I remember I graduated high school, and I wanted to make sure that I graduated high school because I didn't want my senior summer to be ruined, and I didn't want to have too much time before I turned 18, just in case things went wrong, because, you know, contingency plans, I'm a planner. And I remember sitting down in my mom and dad's bedroom, and there was a fireplace in there, and I sat on the edge of the fireplace, and I think they were fighting about something, and in typical Josh fashion, I'm not good with segues, and I just go, hey, mom, dad, I'm gay, you know, which stops the fight abruptly. And dad, who is hard of hearing, goes, you're what? And mom goes, okay. And he goes, no, you're what? And I was like, dad, I'm gay. And I think the rest of the night was a blur. I think I remember going downstairs from their bedroom to make mac and cheese, because that's my comfort food, from the blue box, because only from the blue box. And then entered the interesting slew of questions from mom, like, how do you know? What have you done? You know, things that you just never want to tell your mom, no matter what sexuality you are. And my dad was really cool with it. Dad was remarkably cooler than mom. And from that point on, I think I really threw myself into, there's this new part of me that I need to figure out. So let me be laser focused on this. And with that laser focus, I think a lot of different things kind of became less prioritized. And so you have Judaism, which is already sitting, I don't remember which side it was it this side? Already sitting over here. And I think it just started going a little further. And I went to college in state, probably about hour and a half, 2 hours away from where I grew up. And I would come down. I came down for Kol Nidre before Yom Kippur in 2007. And I remember we ate last dinner before starting the fast. And I am reading through Kol Nidre. And I'm going through it, and I'm going through it, and I'm going through it. And I remember distinctly at this point going, I don't understand or believe any of this. And I think that was when I made a clear, conscious choice that I love the religion that I was brought up in. I think there are a lot of wonderful traditions that I had, and I think a lot of wonderful times that I had. But the religion that I grew up in and what I associated with my religion wasn't there anymore. The big family gatherings weren't there. We weren't really going to synagogue for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur anymore because my mom and dad both have their fair share of health issues, and we weren't really doing much. And I think, again, Josh, just looking at things, I went, okay, so I have this aspect of my life, this side, that I'm not really doing much on anymore. And it's clearly not making sense to me in my head anymore. And there's this thing, which I have so much to learn about and I'm so interested in. So let me throw everything in this pot over here. And so I did. In so many ways, because not only did I, oh my God, I get to go out to gay clubs now. And I get to like really date boys, and I don't have to hide and pretend that I'm just going to sleepovers with my friend Laura. I left, I left my college, I left my state. I applied for the Disney College Program, which is an internship with college credit. It's basically you go away to Disney and you work for 4 months. And so I did, selling turkey legs and pineapple floats at the Magic Kingdom in Orlando, Florida. And I got here and it was like gay Mecca. I had all these other boys around me, probably none of them Jewish, I didn't take the time to know or care, who just were looking for and finding connections with other gay boys who had just run away from home because they didn't either find the outlets that they were looking for at home, or they weren't accepted, which was much more dramatic. But we came here together, and as has been tradition since Disney World pretty much opened in '71, the gay boys kind of found a home here. And so yet again, here I am just exploring this gay part of myself now, and really, really loving and enjoying it. And so that's kind of what I did. And as time went on, I think I just, in myself, knowing that I loved growing up Jewish and knowing that there were so many traditions that I thought were beautiful, I just started referring to myself as, I was raised Jewish, but I identify as culturally Jewish now. And I think I love that about myself. But I don't necessarily know if I identify as religiously Jewish anymore. Maybe because I have ADHD and I didn't have the time to spend on both being Jewish and gay. But since moving to Orlando, my gayness, if you want to call it that, has thrived. I mean, I have such a network out here that I definitely would not have had in suburbia Colorado. And, I look back, and in suburbia Colorado, there's not really, I guess, a support network for Jews either. So I think I just had an incredible personal journey coming out to Orlando, and watching this community develop since 2008 and just getting the most incredible friends. And I remember when I was a kid in Colorado, and I would watch Queer as Folk on Showtime. I would steal myself away to go to the second bedroom and watch Queer as Folk while mom and dad were sleeping, because, that show was not appropriate for a 15, 16-year-old to watch. It's barely appropriate for me as a 30-year-old to watch parts of. And I was just like, God, I wish I could find a group of people like that. Um, and I think that's what I found out here. Um, so, I mean, major milestones that have happened for me out here, like I am in a beautiful, wonderful, loving, long-term relationship of 4 years at this point. I love him so much. Um, I was here in 2016 when the Pulse nightclub shooting happened. I lived, I think, 10 blocks north of it. So, I mean, you want to talk about like, I heard the helicopters every night for a week when everything was going on. I have been here for the 25th anniversary of Gay Days, which was huge. I mean, Gay Days in Orlando, it started in 1991. A group of guys got together on like, this was like pre-AOL, like an online chat room, and just said, let's get together at the Magic Kingdom and wear red shirts just to be seen. And that just grew for 25 years. And people still to this day, well, not this year because of, COVID, but people still to this day on the first Saturday in June get together at Magic Kingdom and wear red shirts just to be seen and to be represented. And I think I latched onto this community that has so much beauty in it and so many things for me to still learn. And it's still growing and developing. And I think that excites me more than, this is going to sound harsh, but that personally excites me more than a religion that I don't think is developing anymore. I mean, you can argue the Talmud is still growing because rabbis still argue about the same thing. But like, for me, I'm excited about seeing where this gay community is going to go. Yeah.
Thank you, Josh, for sharing your really beautiful story. I think that what you're talking about has the potential to really resonate with people all around the world. I think something you said that really stood out to me, when you were talking about Disney World, you said that it was a place where gay boys could find a home. These are people who, like you said, they ran away from their own childhoods, from their own families in some cases, and they came together, they united, and they were able to form their own family. And I think that's a really powerful statement that really resonates with many, many LGBT people out there. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if we could go all the way back. You spoke a little bit about the culture, the Jewish culture that you grew up in, and it's fascinating to me as an Australian to hear about the 4 levels of Judaism. We can go into that a little bit or not, but I wanted to know if you could talk about your gayness. So do you have any memories of when you first started to feel like you saw the world differently to other people? And maybe the first time that you started to hear LGBT language being used around you?
Sure. I think there are a couple levels to that question. I think we're talking about when I first said to myself, oh, I might be a homosexual, kind of.
Yeah. Sometimes we have those thoughts before we have the language to describe it.
Oh, yeah. I remember, if I can get a little graphic, I remember watching porn when I was a teenager. And that porn would go back and forth probably between straight and gay, because at that time it was whatever you could find on Napster or that illegally downloaded stuff. And I remember, I think, gay porn popping up, and I would watch it and enjoy it, and at the same time say to myself, I'm not gay, I'm not gay, I'm not gay, I'm not gay, but clearly being very gay in my actions and my choices at that moment. I think that was the really clear like switch, I guess, if you will, when that happened. But when did I start hearing gay language? I remember, I don't know how old I was, but I remember my mom, who worked in wholesale distributing for automobile parts. Um, she had quite a few gay men on staff, and she made one offhand comment because I think something was on the news, and she was like, "God, they're just coming out of the woodwork, these gays," and I think that made my ears like perk up. Right? Like, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I don't know. But I also remember being very aware because she had two employees that worked there, and this was probably early '90s, mid '90s, when the world did not really have a handle. I mean, HIV/AIDS is much more managed now than it was then. And even then, I mean, it was still, rent was very relevant. You know, you're still dealing with AZT in the mid '90s. And I remember one of her employees passed away from AIDS. And I think that was, I don't necessarily know if that was a moment that shaped me, but it's definitely a moment that I took stock of. Because you have these two things of, God, they're coming out of the woodwork. And then you also have like, yeah, but they're not living. So I remember that very clearly. And then I think another moment that I remember extremely clearly was in 2000 in Colorado. I think that was the first time on the state ballot was gay marriage. Which is crazy to think about, that like it took 15 years from that point to become legal nationally in the States. But I remember those 2 points very clearly, I think, as far as when I was seeing gay language, and then cut forward to like a couple of years after gay marriage, and I'm there watching SeanCody.com. And then, I think like you take it from there.
There's something else you mentioned that was really fascinating to me, which was talking, during your bar mitzvah years, you were dealing with a family tragedy at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And you found that you were immersed in religion, whether you would have actively chosen to or not. That was just, in some ways, you were brought closer to religion through a death in the family. So I was just interested to know, all these years later, you spoke about being very close to the Orlando tragedy, and many of the gay LGBT people who were affected by that tragedy had religious upbringings. I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on whether a tragedy like that targets the LGBT community brings people closer to their faith.
I think any sort of tragic occurrence that you feel close to you, I think you naturally look for answers, right? So I was speaking earlier of those family friends where there were 5 siblings and 2 of them were gay, and they weren't necessarily talked to by the older Orthodox sibling anymore, right? It just so happens the older Orthodox sibling, and this kind of goes back to the 4 levels of Judaism, which I'll explain in a second. She was not raised Orthodox, and she did not live Orthodox until her husband experienced the death of his parents and was brought closer to religion. He became Orthodox. She ascended to Orthodox with him and became more religious. So to explain, in the 4 levels of Judaism that I was talking about, so you have Orthodox over here, I think is where I did it. Orthodox is probably the most religious. Orthodox is where you're talking about men wear payas, and in synagogue, the men sit on different sides from the women. You talk about Jewish weddings, the men dance with the men, the women dance with the women. It's pretty much everything you see on Fiddler on the Roof. In traditional, you probably have a lot of that. In traditional households, you're still probably going to light for Shabbat every Friday night. You're still going to maybe not keep as kosher, but like, milk and meat, that's not happening. In conservative, you're kind of in between this like, I'll do Shabbat if I feel like it. I'll still light for Hanukkah. I'll still not really, I won't eat bread on Passover. I'll still fast for Yom Kippur. And we'll get together for Rosh Hashanah and we'll do apples and honey. And then Reform is like, ooh, we're going to have muffins on Passover morning. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, you are, I guess if I were anything, I'd probably be closer to Reform, because Reform is like, yeah, this is a part of my identity and I think it's cool, but I'm also just gonna, I'm not gonna ignore the other parts of my life. Now that I've explained that, going back to the Orlando shooting, yeah, there are a few examples I have. So not only did the Orlando shooting affect LGBTQ people, it affected disproportionately Hispanic and Latinx people in Orlando, which for the most part has a very Christian upbringing, and it is very powerful in here, and they all feel very tied to their faith. So for them, yeah, there's a lot of, when the tragedy happened, there was, so to explain a little bit of Orlando geography to you, there's one main street called Orange Avenue that kind of goes directly up. You have Pulse right here, and then just probably up the street, I want to say 5-6 blocks, you have a really big hospital system called the Orlando Regional Medical Center. And those 6 blocks is where ambulances went back and forth. It's where people threw victims and survivors into trucks and drove them up. It was where people carried people, which it's going to be called the Survivors Walk when the memorial opens in a few years. But along the side of Orlando Regional Medical Center, this man from, and I wish I could say where he was from, I cannot remember, but he made crosses for each one of the 49 victims with their name and their picture, and it was gorgeous. And clearly a cross is a Christian symbol. So I think we, as not just gay people or Jewish people, but I think we as people, we go to wherever is closest to us to find comfort in times of tragedy. So I think that happens. And then you, on the other end of the spectrum, there was a survivor who has since become very, very, very religious and no longer identifies as LGBT anymore. He feels that he prayed in the club for God to save him, and God did, and he is now no longer identifying with that sinful part of his older self. So I think you have a few different turns to religion that can happen.
That's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So where are you today so you moved to Orlando, you said 8 years ago now?
Almost 13, 2008.
13. Oh, 2008.
Yeah.
So what's your relationship with the community you grew up in back in Colorado?
It is funny you mention that, because just this year, I mentioned earlier that my mom and dad have various health issues. And my siblings and I have been trying for probably a good 5 years to get them to move closer to me down here, just so that they have someone that is near and they can get the care that they need where they need it and when they need it. And luckily, in the beginning of February, we got them out of Denver, and we got them here to Florida about a month before the pandemic hit. So my current relationship with where I grew up, there is one friend who lives there that I still currently talk to regularly. And my other relationship is waiting for the house to sell. But after that house sells, I don't know the next time I'm going to be in suburbia, Colorado.
So you mentioned that you're in a long-term relationship, which
Yeah.
is very exciting.
Yeah.
Have you thought about, if you don't want to talk about this, this is cool as well. Have you thought about marriage, kids, and how you might want to bring Judaism into that space, if at all?
Sure. So I'll go backwards. So as far as religion, he was raised Catholic. And without speaking for him too much, because I don't really want to, he's been pretty clear about turning his back on religion, as is pretty frequently happens with gay boys in church and gay boys with Christianity. It's usually sin, damnation, hellfire, blah blah blah. And he was kind of like, okay, cool, bye. And so he identifies as atheist. That being said, we still put up a Christmas tree because we're still gay and everything shines and glitters, so that's going to always happen. As far as me bringing Judaism into the household, we light for Hanukkah every year. That's about it. We've talked about kids in the sense that we don't want any. And as far as marriage, that is something that we definitely do want. When I was visiting Denver, I want to say about a year ago, I was there, him and I were both there, and then two of my sisters and one of my brothers were there. And we were all having margaritas, and my sister that's closest to me in age looks at my partner and I and goes, "So are you guys gonna ever get married?" You know, as family is wont to do. And I think it was at that point that it came out that I have a plan to ask him to marry me. He also has a plan to ask me to marry him that neither of us were aware of. We still don't know what's going to happen with the other ones. And it's not a race. It's just kind of whatever happens first happens first.
Whatever happens, it has to be on TikTok or something. It has the
Oh no.
proposal has to be.
Oh no. There'll be a picture on social media, but we're not the type to like, which is crazy because my profession, before my current one, I was a full-time actor and performer. So it's like, yeah, being dramatic, being in the spotlight, it's fine with me. But when it comes to stuff like that, I'm like, no, nope, shut the technology down.
I have one final question for
Sure.
you, Josh. I'd like to go back, all the way back to.
My bris. Okay, so about my bris.
Do you remember your bris? Is what I'm asking.
No, but apparently my mom got me drunk for it, dipping wine in the. Anyway, go on. What was your question?
There's a lot of getting drunk in Judaism. There's the four cups on Pesach, but I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah, but that's Manischewitz. It doesn't count.
um, so you spoke about being you were going through puberty and watching porn.
Yeah.
And you're watching straight porn, and then suddenly gay porn came up, and you found yourself, watching gay porn, and that journey was really a moment of self-identification for you. And through that process, you really started to have that conversation to say, yes, maybe I am gay. And I think this is actually quite a common story with the conversations I've had with people. Their journey of self-discovery often happens through porn. I just wanted to ask, thinking back to Josh all the way back then,
Mm-hmm.
looking at gay porn, starting to have this conversation with himself, his entire journey just ahead of him, so many questions to be answered. All these years later, with all the knowledge and wisdom that you've gained, 30, 31, I should say.
Yeah.
What would you say to him if you had a chance?
Oh, this is like RuPaul's Drag Race. I think, I'm gonna steal someone else's. I don't know if you or anyone else is watching Canada's Drag Race, but that question, not in its exact form, was asked to one of the other queens. And one of the other queens said something that I looked at my partner last night and I said, that is something that only gay people will understand. And what this queen said she would tell her younger self is, be gay. Just be gay. Stop wasting time. Go be gay. Like, just be gay. And I think, 31-year-old saying that to 13-year-old Josh is overly simplistic. And would 13-year-old Josh understand? I don't know, but 31-year-old Josh does and knows how important it is to just like stop wasting time. Just go do it. Embrace the SeanCody.com. Like, and then go find your tribe, find your family, and don't be afraid to, as the Jews made the pilgrimage through the desert, don't be afraid to make your own pilgrimage to your own family. You'll find it.
Thank you so much, Josh, for taking time to be part of the Pride in the Living Room project. As I said before, I think your words really have an immense power to reach out to Jewish people, to the gay boys, like you said, and more. Do you have any final words of wisdom before we part ways?
No. No, I think that's good.
Fair enough. In that case, here's to sharing our story in this moment and many more moments in the future. Thank you, Josh.
Thanks.